Oh, g'day, my name is John, and this is the third in a series of videos that I'm doing on these little Chinese diesel heaters. This one is about fuel consumption. Now, I see a lot of YouTube videos where people go to great lengths to try and measure the fuel consumption of these. They put it in metered containers, they'll run it for an hour or a day, sometimes 2 days, to try and get an average consumption. But really it's so simple to do mathematically, and I'll show you that in a second. But first we go back to some basics. These heaters have no carburetor, so they rely on this little metered fuel pump to inject fuel into the system. Now, there are electromagnet in here with a tiny little piston, so when the magnet is energized, the piston flies up and sends a dose of fuel out the top. This frequency of the dose is called hertz, so it's controlled by your controller here in a manual mode, which then is governed by the ECU in here, which matches the pulse rate with the fan speed to get a nice burn. Now, because this dose is fixed in these heaters, that dose in there is always 0.02 of a milliliter, and it's a fixed rate. So because that rate is fixed, we know from these little electronic controllers that what the pulse rate is. So, you know, we can change the pulse rate to do it manually. So, for instance, this now is telling me that this heater is running at a pulse rate of 2 hertz, or 2 cycles per second. So by knowing that data, then we can work it out mathematically. Alright, first we'll go through and show you just how small that dose is. Now, this is 0.02 of a milliliter. It's quite a tiny dose. Now, this teaspoon holds 5 milliliters, so a standard teaspoon holds 5 milliliters of fluid. So to fill that teaspoon, this little pump has to pump 250 times to fill the teaspoon. Okay, now we know the dose and we know the frequency, we can easily work out the fuel burn. So dose by pulse equals fuel burn. So we know the dose in milliliters. We know the pulse rate because we can look it off the controller. It gives you milliliters in seconds, so we multiply by 60 to get minutes, then we multiply by 60 again to get hours, and that will give us our fuel burn in milliliters per hour. So at the moment we're running 2 milliliters. Sorry, we're running a pulse rate of 2 hertz, so we know the pulse, the dose is 0.02 milliliters, so 0.02 milliliters multiplied by 2 hertz, multiplied by 60 to give it in minutes, multiplied by 60 to give it in hours, and we have a fuel burn of 144 milliliters per hour. And we can do that for, you know, any particular speed we want to run that heater. A medium, normally about 3 hertz, gives 260 milliliters an hour, or if we go into boost mode, say 5.5 hertz, we get 396 milliliters an hour. So every one of these heaters is exactly the same. It depends on the pulse rate. So the dose on all these heaters, no matter which brand you buy, is always 0.02 milliliter. So you just look at the pulse rate. So these heaters will run roughly from on a low speed from 144 milliliters per hour fuel burn up to nearly 400 milliliters per hour on full boost. So quite simple. No need to go back and try and do all these silly calculations. You just do it all mathematically. Now, there's one thing that you need to be aware. I'll just tell you about these little heaters again. This little piston runs up and down here, and when it's energized, it really flies up and down. So we're running up and down 5 times a second on a boost. So when it flies up, it creates a low pressure area in the bottom here. And when that low pressure it creates bubbles, and that is quite normal, just the same as in a say a bottle of champagne. You release the pressure in the champagne, the bubbles come out of solution. Or a scuba diver, and I know about this because I was an instructor in my younger days, that if the diver comes up too quickly, the dissolved gas in his blood and tissues comes out of solution and forms bubbles, and then we get what we call decompression sickness, or the bends. But these little heaters will always have little bubbles running through them, and that is quite normal. So it is critical that when you mount these pumps, you mount them in a vertical manner so the bubbles can come out. If you mount them on their side, what happens is the little bubbles form a big bubble on the top of the piston, and that then creates dosage issues and also wear issues, because the lubrication of this piston, it's metal on metal. There's no oil lubrication like you have in a motor car or piston rings. It's just a very tight fit with a little metal on metal. So a little metal piston in a little metal chamber running up and down. It gets its lubrication from the diesel. So if you have a bubble on top here, what you're going to have is not only an incorrect dosage rate, but you're going to have metal on metal wear and create wear in the little fuel pump. Alright, now you can work out your fuel consumption on these little heaters. Quite simple, isn't it? Thanks for watching.